Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
So, in this presentation the focus would be on the 9 planetary boundaries framework. So, we will discuss several concepts within the 9 planetary boundaries framework, and these concepts are the 9 planetary boundaries themselves. What are these 9 planetary boundaries? And before knowing this list of 9 boundaries, we also need to know that what are thresholds and what are boundaries as per the conceptualization or assessment of the Stockholm Resilience Center, and more specifically Johan Rockström and his team. We will discuss that. And we are also going to talk about the interactions or the overlaps, the overlapping interactions and the feedback loops across these 9 planetary boundaries. So, we would and this is related to this cross scale complexities. So, we will see that how these planetary boundaries they converge, they interact with each other from local, regional, continental and planetary scales across all these 4 scales. So, we had discussed in the last presentation that how the period of Holocene was period of stability, but then the irony of the Holocene was that as the epoch visualized or encountered growth, economic growth. So, this exponential economic growth after a particular point of time, it had impacts on it kind of destabilized the biophysical components or processes of planet Earth, and caused abrupt and irreversible changes on environment, and unfortunately with a deleterious and oblivious effect on human well-being. So, we can see or we can understand this we can understand that this relationship between economic growth and ecological sustainability is inversely proportional. Okay. So, so as this exponential economic growth had lot of impact on the environment, so finally it became very important to kind of search or to identify what would be the safe operating space, SOS, for humanity. Now, this man Johan Rockström and his team, they did a brilliant they conducted brilliant research on kind of quantifying the thresholds, and but they also discussed the limitations of quantification as a method, or the limitations of quantification procedure, and I will discuss all this. But what is most important is that I think personally I also feel that the contribution of this Stockholm Resilience Center, Rockström and his team has been enormous in terms of formulating this framework called the 9 planetary boundaries to kind of validate the scientific truth of the present epoch of the Anthropocene. Yes. So, they were earth system scientists, and they wanted to kind of trace these earth system processes by identifying key earth system processes, and how this could have been done through the quantification of the boundary level for each of these earth system or for each of these biophysical processes and components. And the final argument was that that if these planetary boundaries are transgressed, if they are crossed, then then we will be in major trouble. So, so this transgression of boundaries will trigger, or each time a boundary is crossed, it triggers like a global environmental transformation or change at an irreversible scale. All right. And I think this particular quote by Rockström et al. Is very, very significant, and to me the key word is non-negotiable. Non-negotiable is the key word. So, these are the planetary preconditions which are non-negotiable. So, which means that that we have to perform, or we have to we have to keep our economic activities in control. We have to develop or innovate methods, mechanisms, small scale practices, environmentally benign processes or technologies. That is a different discussion altogether, but what is most important is that through this planetary boundaries framework, they could finally talk about the non-negotiable, which means conditions with which negotiations are no more possible. So, I personally I very much I am quite influenced by this framework. Why? Because they try to address this particular question, I think, which is the question of this century. And what is this question? This question is, what are the non-negotiable planetary precondition that humanity needs to respect? And this is the second keyword. This is the second keyword, a second most important keyword to me, because we really need to respect these non-negotiable planetary preconditions. And why do we need to respect this? For our own benefit, for the larger benefit of planet Earth, for the larger benefit of all other species with which we cohabit this particular planet. So, what are the non-negotiable planetary preconditions that humanity needs to respect in order to avoid the risk of deleterious or even catastrophic environmental change at continental to global scales? So, these again remain so very important, that these changes are occurring across all scale, from local to regional to continental to global. And so, we discussed that in the Holocene period, maybe the planet also encountered some changes, some ecological changes, but the repercussions were not enormous in terms of spatial scales. But now the kind of changes that we are encountering, we must remember that these changes, they are occurring at every scale, at all scales, across local, regional, continental and global scales. So, you have to remember this particular question, which is so important and which is so loaded, and which explains the context, which explains the reason or the rationale, which validates the rationale that why the Stockholm Resilience Center and why Rockstorm and his team plunged into this robust exercise of coming up with a framework through which their Anthropocene could actually be kind of questioned and also validated, more importantly. So, Rockstorm talked about thresholds and boundaries. So, they use these two concepts to kind of quantify these changes in the biophysical processes of the Earth system. So, what are thresholds? So, thresholds are, they explain thresholds as non-linear transitions in the functioning of coupled human environmental systems. So, these are non-linear transitions, for example, which can be explained through the recent abrupt retreat of Arctic sea ice caused by anthropogenic global warming. And they pointed out, they explained that this for all the different biophysical processes, the thresholds are actually not known. So, for example, and also the whole idea that these thresholds, they are the intrinsic features, or they are the non-linear features of these biophysical processes, which are also determined by the position of control variables. So, for example, temperature, or for example, ice albedo effect. All right, in case of sea ice, for that matter. And I was saying that it was difficult to because all the thresholds are not known. So, it is not possible to kind of have a concrete knowledge and understanding about these thresholds. So, for example, land use change. So, for land use change from the continental to the global scale, the threshold is unknown, but on what basis then they did the calculations, did do the calculations. So, for example, though the threshold is not known from continental to global scale, we are talking about land use change, but at least this has been validated that through through a continuous decline of key ecological functionings like carbon sequestration for that matter, and if this keeps on getting accumulated or aggregated, then definitely it will trigger or it will have an impact on on a global scale threshold, for that matter climate change. Again, at the same time, this will also impact local or regional scale processes, like by bringing down or maybe having some impact on the threshold in terms of like lakes or reservoirs or forests, all right, like savannas, etc. So, the whole idea is that through by a proper understanding of or a proper mapping of increase or decline or decrease of key ecological functionings, some conclusions could be arrived at. Now, what is a boundary? So, the boundary is actually human determined values of the control variable set as a safe distance from a dangerous level, and that is why this showed, and they said that crossing each boundary will be extremely problematic, because then our survival would be at stake, the survival of planet Earth would be at stake. So, this boundary remained a very important concept to kind of to set this safe distance from a dangerous level. But then again, as thresholds, most of the thresholds are unknown. So, we do not know, we do not have concrete data about thresholds, it's and these are unknown. So, definitely the limitation in this boundary concept is that as it depends on the knowledge relating to thresholds. So, and as knowledge about thresholds are not have not come down to us, so there is a whole lot of uncertainty about this. So, already this boundary framework, it has this problem of uncertainty ingrained in it. And there is another point which I would also like to highlight here, that is, it is not only the uncertainty in the quantification process in terms of uncertainty about the threshold, but it is also about there are some normative judgments which are also there in this process, because for example, how different complex societies would respond to the risks and uncertainties, these are also some questions, and we do not have really a hardcore numerical data on this. So, it is quite difficult to kind of make linear conclusions or statements so far as these boundaries are concerned. So, it has its limitation, but at the same time this is important, because at least it enable us to kind of be more aware and also engage ourselves in this process of understanding the changes in biophysical processes of planet Earth caused largely by economic activities of human beings. So, human induced planetary change. Now, this planetary boundaries framework, again it rests on on three key scientific inquiries. So, the first addresses the scale of human action in relation to the capacity of the Earth to sustain it. So, human action on one hand, and then the capacity. So, at what point at what particular point the Earth actually reaches its saturation point. All right. So, the capacity, the carrying capacity of the Earth. So, the scale of human action in relation to the capacity of the Earth to sustain it, and I must say that it draws largely, they drew largely from the ecological economics frameworks, and for example, the works initiated by Costanza and his team. And the second is the work on understanding essential earth system processes. So, here they drew heavily from sustainability science and from earth system science, and the third is the framework of resilience, and its links to complex dynamics and self-regulation of living systems, emphasizing on like multiple basins of attraction and threshold effects. So, these are the three important scientific inquiries on which the planetary boundaries framework actually rests. And again, Rockstrom, they argue that the first step, by identifying biophysical boundaries at the planetary scale within which humanity has a flexibility to choose a myriad of pathways for human well-being and development. This is a very, very important statement which is close to my heart, because they said, you know, they say that it's not a doomsday message. It's not a doomsday message, but this exercise is important. This exercise is important because through this exercise we will be in a position to kind of identify, you know, these biophysical boundaries at the planetary scale, at the global scale, and then we will understand that what are our limits. So, what is a boundary, and we also discussed about this non-negotiable planetary preconditions. So, if we are aware of, you know, of each boundary, then we will have we will be in a position to think about our next course of actions. So, then we can choose, we can select a myriad of pathways, you know, for our own being, for our own well-being, for the for the well-being of the planet Earth at large. So, these are the 9 planetary boundaries: climate change, loss of species, biodiversity, extinction of species, addition of phosphorus and nitrogen, so phosphorus and nitrogen cycles, deforestation and land use change, emission of aerosols, then stratospheric ocean depletion, ozone depletion. So, this is ozone depletion, stratospheric ozone depletion, and ocean acidification, freshwater use, and dumping of organic pollutants, so chemical pollution. So, these are the 9 planetary boundaries which they identified, and they also, this group made a distinction between boundaries which were directly related to sharp planetary scales. Here you can see the distinction, and also the slow boundaries where, you know, there is no clear cut evidence till date about the threshold, and which also shows the underlying resilience of planet Earth in the form of, you know, functioning as sink, and also regulating, you know, water, then mineral and other the other mineral nutrient fluxes, etc. So, this distinction is also very much there in this in the identification and mapping of these 9 planetary boundaries. And I think one important point is that though they made this distinction between you know, more direct and rapid variable and slow variables, but till they, you know, they kind of provided a warning. So, there is also a warning note in this distinction, that if even, you know, slow variables they keep on aggregating and accumulating for a period of time, then of course they can trigger major changes at the planetary scale, for which we really I mean, so which should draw you know, our concern, which should draw our concern. So, this it is important to understand the nature of these boundaries and how these processes are at play across, again, the interplay of constant and not so constant variables. And also they talked about, you know, large scale or maybe, you know, planetary scale processes, like for that matter climate change, which also has a lot of impact on sub-earth system, processes and scales. So, for example, this climate change, it is itself at least associated with the 9 subsystem tipping elements, which are all sensitive to climate change. So, I think the beauty of this planetary boundaries framework is that it also addresses the cross scale complexities. So, the cross scale complexities have been addressed I mean quite systematically and scientifically in this 9 planetary boundaries approach. So, this is a very complex table, and in the reading list you will see that I have I have provided you with this reference. This is this article by Rockstorm and his team, which was published in 2009 in Ecology and Society, and you have no option but to really go through this article in great detail if you have to have a better understanding of this 9 planetary boundaries framework, and it will be crucial not only for this urbanization and environment course. Of course, you have to have a I mean great deal of understanding about these, about Anthropocene and Urbanocene and all the other scenes like Technocene, Capitalocene, etc., which will cover in our subsequent lectures. But I think this is very, very important for researchers who are working in the domain of the environment, be it from the natural science perspectives or the social science perspective or a combination of both. So, please you cannot avoid this framework and this article by Rockstorm and team, and this is the table, and this table itself is it's loaded, but at the same time it is quite explanatory, self-explanatory. So, it is explanatory by itself. So, I will not go into the details, but here they talk about all these arts and processes, the control variables, the boundary as a zone of uncertainty, and what is our knowledge. So, what is our knowledge about each boundary, but just a disclaimer that the data is not updated here, because this is the data which pertains to this 2009, because this article came out in 2009, but after that Stockholm Resilience Center has conducted number of research on kind of updating this information. So, and you will see that I will also talk about this in the last leg of this lecture, that by now how some planetary boundaries unfortunately have already been transgressed. And because here also, like if you see the table, it also talks about how climate change, the first boundary has already been transgressed. So, we are not in the safe operating space so far as the first planetary boundary, that is climate change, is concerned. So, this is again a very significant simulation diagram or a simulation model, which was developed by the CCM3 climate model. And this simulation model, it clearly shows the interactions and cross scale complexities which are there in terms of changes in a particular region, and how that how a particular change in a specific region can have a whole lot of impact on other spatial sites. So, what are the cross connection, what are the interactions, what are the overlaps, what are the cross scale complexities that this through which can also be understood by applying or by deploying this 9 planetary boundaries framework as the frame of analysis. So, here for example, I'll give an example. Let us take the example of Amazon forest, right. So, Amazon forest, in the Amazon forest, a considerable amount of water is recycled through vegetation. All right, and the forest also forest and vegetation also, like it flushes aerosol particles, and these aerosol particles are again this aerosol particle remains crucial for the formation of clouds. All right, and if there are changes in concentration of particles, so if there are transformations or there are changes in particle concentration, then it can impact the rains, precipitation, and also the strength of the convective circulation on that region, on that belt. So, this can again have some form of impact on on aerosols itself. And moreover, like this deforestation, deforestation and land use change in Amazon, it definitely it has a lot of it can trigger change, it can destabilize the regular precipitation pattern, and this can again have an impact on the vegetation and on the aerosols. So, this is a clear cut example of a feedback loop that is there in the Amazon basin, and one can understand that if this change continues for a long period of time, then there can be replacement of the entire Amazon. So, that we can see a change in the nature of the Amazon forest, where it can even transform into a savanna like forest by the end of the 21st century. So, we can understand how this feedback loop actually works. Now, the next argument is that these interactions are not only limited within this regional scale of the Amazon, but it has more advanced repercussions. So, for example, it will not be an exaggeration if I say, and this has been proved and justified with the simulation model, that changes in Amazon, it will influence, it will have an impact on the surface temperature of Tibet, for that matter. So, like for example, the changes in precipitation level, it can affect the energy balance of the convective circulation, and this can cause a northward shift of the intertropical convergence zone, which will again have an impact on the weather conditions, and finally this will affect surface temperature in Tibet. The story does not end here. So, the surface temperature change in Tibet will have repercussions on the water resources of Asia. So, for example, this 15,000 glaciers in the Himalayan Hindu Kush region are responsible for 12,000 cubic kilometers of fresh water for this entire basin, for this entire region, and I mean it caters to the need of like 500 inhabitants, 500 million inhabitants, and plus an additional like 200 million inhabitants in China. And so this change in this glaciation pattern, changes in that glacier belt, it will definitely have impact on floods, and in the short term it can cause increased runoff. It will trigger floods or flood events, flood vulnerability in the region, and it will have sets of impact on precipitation variability. So, you can understand that how all these planetary boundaries are interconnected to each other through this cross scale interactions and overlaps. Yes, so I was also talking about the transgression of the boundaries. So, you can see that how yeah. So, out of these 9 planetary boundaries, how already we have kind of crossed. So, these are crucial thresholds, and unfortunately no more we are in the safe operating space so far as these 4 thresholds are concerned. So, you can take a more detailed look into this slide to get an understanding of our present situation, because that is the idea. Through planetary boundaries we need to know and understand our present situation, so that we can design and develop and innovate strategies through which we will be in a position to remain within this safe operating space. Yes. So, these are the references again, and I would definitely, you have no option, but you have to go through the particular article by Stephen and Rockstorm and team, and this, so these two articles. So, this one which which came out in 2009 in Ecology and Society, so Rockstrom and his team, and this particular article by Will Stephen, and you will find similar names because they updated the information in 2015. So, I showed you the table from the 2009 article, but if you also go through 2015 article, it will be a little bit updated, you will have updated information and facts about where we are at this particular stage. Yes. So, let us conclude the lecture with the key highlights. So, what we did here is we discussed planetary boundaries. So, why did we discuss planetary boundaries as a topic? Because it is an important tool of analysis, it is an important quantitative framework through which Anthropocene actually has been validated. That yes, we are on a new era, we are on a watershed epoch where the earth is changing at a very fast space, and so it is important for us to identify safe operating space for humanity. And there are some challenges, there are some limitations, because we don't have proper knowledge about these thresholds. But so these planetary boundaries can also be considered to be zones of uncertainties, but at least these boundaries, this threshold and boundary concept are important because they enable us to understand our position and enable us to understand the changes that are occurring at the biophysical components from local to the planetary scales. And finally, there are interactions among boundaries. So, maybe even if a boundary is at a safe position now, but even continuous decline in key ecological functionings can actually trigger and destabilize the system, and it can be a concern for humanity in the long run. So, that warning is also there. And if we understand planetary boundaries properly, we will be in a position to understand that this how transformations in these scales can really have an impact across time, across space, and at the global scale. And finally, we also learned that already the earth has transgressed some of these planetary boundaries, but again I do not want to end with a doomsday message, because I think that we also have hopeful stories to cherish and to relish upon. For example, through concerted human action, some changes, some improvement could actually occur so far as this planetary boundary of stratospheric ozone depletion is concerned. So, please go through, I will encourage you to go through Montreal Protocol and how through concerted human action the world could manage and tackle this particular problem of ozone depletion, and where we are right now. So, the whole idea is that through deliberate concerted actions, we can really act and enact if we have the will. But is will the key word? So, that is what we are going to discuss in our next lecture on the capital Ocene. Thank you.